Hi, Jackie.
Hello.
Hi, everyone. We are here this morning on this beautiful July day in Evanston outside of our visitor center. This is the first time that Jackie and I have been on campus since mid-March. This morning was maybe the third time I have driven a car since mid-March. And we are here, we're sitting, our faces are 6 feet apart. We've got our very chic little face masks handy. And we're here to talk to you all about college essays and talk with each other. I think one of the most important things that, before we dig in and introduce ourselves a little more, that we are hoping to provide with this format where we're talking to each other rather than kind of one person giving advice into the camera, is to really underscore that there's no one way to do your college essay, and there's no secret to unlock in terms of how to get it right. There is no formula or format that you can kind of nail. And so over the course of this discussion, you might hear Jackie and me disagree about something. You might hear us kind of, if we're talking about what we hope to learn from your essay, we might have different things that we come into the application with, and we might come into different applications with different hopes or expectations for a particular student's essay. And that's kind of what we're after here. We're hoping to pull the rug out from any sense that you have that there is a right way to do this, and give you some advice along those lines. My name's Liz Kinsley. Just to dive into introductions here, I'm the Director of Undergraduate Admission here at Northwestern. I have been doing college admissions and higher ed work for about 15 years, and I've also worked in other admissions offices. I've worked on the college counseling side. I teach classes here at Northwestern. I did my doctorate here along the way, have taught high school English, so talking about essays is near and dear to me from all of those angles, not just as somebody who reads applications, but having done college counseling and taught writing and things like that. So I'm excited to be here this morning.
Yeah, awesome. And so am I. I'm super excited to be here. My name is Jackie Marthouse. I have worked in admissions now for almost 5 years, and I was a communications major actually at Northwestern, so I'm an alum. I also just recently earned my master's in marketing, so I'm that double wildcat. I really enjoyed my time at Northwestern and obviously still enjoy it. So I'm excited today to dig in with Essays with Liz, since we actually kind of go way back about essays, since I actually was in her class.
You took my class in junior year.
Yeah, so
here, and so I can vouch for her writing skills.
Yes. So we go way back on that.
So we thought we'd start by talking about not how to write the essay, which I know is what, again, everyone's kind of hanging on that question, but I think it's more important to start with why we have an essay in your college application when we're doing holistic reading, right? That's the first thing to emphasize about how we read in our selective admission process. We're kind of connecting the dots across different parts of your application. And so what are we looking to see in an essay, or what might we learn from an essay, I think is where we wanted to start. So maybe Jackie can reflect on that, and I'll riff off of you.
Yeah, sure. So like, what is this point of the essay, right? Why are we even considering it? I think when I look at an essay, it's a point where it's something that you have put your own personality into it, your own voice. It's something where I can't necessarily garner who you are from other pieces. So those are more quantitative. This is a qualitative piece that I can review. And so what I'm hoping to gain from it is just a sense of maybe your values or who you are or what you might bring to the college environment. It's beyond just how do you write, right? Or what can you offer in a classroom? It's what can we gain to know about you that we can't find across the rest of the application? So I don't want to say that this is super, super important that you should spend all your time like overdoing it, but I want to say that it is that space that you can control and consider while you're writing that essay, what you're telling us. What does that mean for us when we're reading it as someone who doesn't know you? What can we learn from you that maybe we haven't learned in the rest of the application?
Yeah. And I think like a lot of folks, when they're talking about college essays, will say things like, tell us who you are, tell us your story. And I might encourage you to think even beyond that in terms of tell us what matters to you. Tell us how you like to think, what kinds of questions you like to ask, right? or even if you don't tell us these things overtly, they'll come across in a really strong college essay. The substance of that essay is going to give us some insight into who you are as an intellectual, who you are as a community member, who you are as a friend, right? Any of these things, but that value system, reflecting on that value system, I think is worthwhile. And something I always say, and I will probably say it again in the course of this conversation, is I say this when we're training with our staff, is that there are college applications where you read the application and you step back and you say, wow, that student did high school really well. Mm-hmm. And then there are other applications where you step back and you say, wow, this is going to be a really exciting college student. And these students could have equally good grades and equally polished resumes or kind of doing exciting things, but like one of them, you're like, that student did high school great. The other one, whew, I want to like take a class with that person or be in a roommate or extracurricular group with that person. And I think the essay can do a lot of that kind of imagining forward or helping us think about who you might be when you start to, step onto a college campus and start to think about not just who you are and what you've done, but like how you see yourself engaging the world around you going forward.
Right. I think when we talked about this before, we were saying that most of the application can show who you were as a high school student, right? But this is a piece that can show who you might be as a college student, and that's something that we really value because this is an application for your next step, right? Yeah. And so I think it's important to understand that that's what we're trying to gain from it, and there are so many ways you can do that, right? I would say.
And as we kind of think about what advice we might give you, a lot of the I think there are, what did we say, 7 topics on the Common Application, the last of which is topic of your choice. And a lot of these prompts will ask you to reflect back on something. Mm-hmm. And so I don't want to confuse things by by saying this is a forward-looking piece. But I think one piece of advice that I would offer up to students without being prescriptive is to encourage you as you're if the prompt is think about a time you were challenged or experienced failure and what you learned. A classic example is I've read lots of essays about failing a driver's test, right? If the essay is leading up, if 3/4 of the essay is leading up to the failure in the driver's test, and like the second to last paragraph gets to the moment you failed your driver's test, and the last paragraph is, here's what I learned. The proportions of that reflection are probably a little out of whack. You'd probably want to fail the driver's test in the first or second paragraph and then bring us to some more interesting substance about what you learned and why that's what that tells us about who you might become in a college setting. Other thoughts about kind of advice around topics or do's and don'ts. I don't love do's and don'ts. Again, I don't like to be overly prescriptive here, but we had some good advice that we were kicking around in preparation for this.
Yeah, I think like starting off with kind of these essay topics that we see, right? The 1 through 7 prompts, and this idea that first off, you have to be so stuck on that prompt. I think you should take a step back from that as well. When we were talking about it, we were like, we almost don't even really zone in so much as to what that prompt is that you're answering. And when I give advice all the time, I say, just make sure you have a main point in your essay, that you have a clear direction in where you're taking this essay. Because at the end of the day, some of the strongest essays aren't necessarily answering word for word what that prompt is asking. Instead, they're starting with maybe that story of failure and really going beyond what that could mean, connecting to broader themes, connecting to who they are as a person. I'm saying a bunch of different things because I think there's not one way to do it. But I did want to kind of hone in on that idea that you don't have to be so stuck on that prompt to answer it. And maybe that means you do choose that one where you choose your own prompt and kind of go with it. But understand that every prompt has that opportunity, I think.
Right. We were talking on Friday preparing for this, and each of us has done panels like this before where we've been with folks from other institutions, and I always kind of some of the first advice folks will sometimes give is make sure you answer the question, and personally that's not a priority for me that you answer the question. I rarely go back to see exactly what question you chose or what prompt you chose. Again, I'm much more interested in the substance of the essay. So I asked Jackie if she often goes back to the prompt, and
It's a no. Yeah.
Although you said your first year reading, you did.
Yes, right. So it's something that also, as I grew, I realized it was less about you answering directly that prompt. But I will admit, yes, the first year I would see that essay about failure. And sometimes you talk about a sports injury, and I'm like, I don't know if I necessarily agree that's a failure. But depending on how you answered it, it could very well be a failure.
Right.
And so I just realized that even these prompts are so subjective to what a right answer is. So why not really dig into what the meaning of the essay is versus what the prompt is saying?
Yeah. And what you want us to know about you after we read it, right? There's no agenda on our end. Our hope is to really step away and know a little bit more about you, how you think, what matters again. In terms of choosing a topic, this was another, we're just going to stay real gray about everything. We're not giving any concrete answers this morning. So turn us off if you thought you might get some concrete answers. But in terms of choosing a topic, we talked about that too. Obviously, the prompts are meant to guide you toward a topic, right? To get you thinking. And to frame some of the ways in which you ask yourselves questions about whatever topic you do choose. One piece of encouragement I always like to give students is to not get too hung up over the topic itself. Don't bend over backwards trying to distinguish yourself in our application process by choosing a topic that we have never seen before. At worst, it might be gimmicky. At best, you're just going to spend more time than you need to on that question because the topic is not really what makes a great essay or a fine essay or a sort of flatter essay. It's really the way you come at that topic, the scope of your essay, the substance, and what you hope to sort of tell us through that topic. So we were talking right now, I've seen lots of half joking and sometimes serious questions around like, well, are you going to read every essay for the next 3 years is going to be about the COVID-19 pandemic, right? I've seen it jokingly, like poor college admissions officer is going to have to read every essay, which again, I'm not a fan of joking about the pandemic in any case, but when I see that joke, my response is I actually feel for the students who are now wrestling with, should I write an essay about the pandemic, or is that going to not distinguish me because everyone's going to write about the pandemic? And I assure you that even if you all wrote about this extraordinary and unprecedented past few months and however they've affected you personally, you're all going to write different essays. So you could all choose the same topic. Don't get hung up on it. If the topic should be kind of close to your gut, right? Or close to your heart or close to your brain, whatever kind of person you are, if you're a heart person or a brain person. And again, we could read 100 essays about sports or about how, food in your family makes you think about culture or tradition or whatever. But some of those are going to be outstanding for reasons that have nothing to do with the topic. I don't know.
Right.
Any other?
Yeah, I mean, as you're talking about this, I mean, I totally agree, right? And as someone who has almost like 5 years, like I said, compared to someone who has many years of experience, I think you can see on both of our ends that we've read probably every topic you can think of already. And it doesn't matter so much what the topic is when an essay stands out in the review process. It's more so how you approach the topic. So as Liz has been saying, like you could all write about this unprecedented pandemic. You could all write about a sports injury, and it would still have pockets of differences depending on how you approach the topic. And so that's just what I want to just kind of underscore that as well. Like it's super important to realize that it's hard to be unique, I think, for anyone, and especially when you're picking a topic. But the way you can find that sense of your ownership and authenticity is by how you actually approach the topic more so than what the topic is.
Yeah, how you come at it. For years, I would use this essay. We were trying to talk to each other about what's the most memorable essay you've read. And keep it positive, not most memorable for reasons that we wouldn't want to discuss on camera, but what's one of the best, most memorable essays you've read? And the I find that the most successful essays are very hard to recapture in a short statement, because they kind of don't come at the essay from a single angle. They're not necessarily formulaic, but they do kind of bring some complexities to the surface about who this student is. And again, how they're starting to connect the dots between self and world around them. And it's hard to kind of recapture that, but to just kind of tie back into the idea of a topic, in panels about essays, you'll often I hear a lot of like don'ts, right? And you can tell we're not trying to focus on the don'ts here, but one of the don'ts I've heard over the years is, if you write an essay about your grandparent and you tell us how wonderful your grandparent is, we're going to read the essay and finish up, and we're going to say, we're not admitting your grandparent. That's the like typical advice that I hear. Frankly, guys, one of the best essays I've ever read that I trotted around in case studies for years was about someone's grandfather, and the relationship that he had with his grandfather, and this kind of beautiful story of growing up and studying science through kind of his grandfather's eyes, who had been a scientist, and then as kind of his grandfather ages and he does too, the kind of tables turn and he starts teaching his grandfather new things that he's read. And so that's an essay where the topic is fundamentally about your grandparent, but the way you come at that topic and the substance you infuse into it by way of the different anecdotes or imagery or whatever it is you're writing can distinguish it as a really memorable piece of insight into who you are.
I just want to say that while it's incredibly hard for us to capture how awesome these essays are, I already felt what that essay was trying to say, right? Just by Liz describing it. And so she's totally right. When we go to these panels or I visit high schools and they're like, well, what's the best essay you've ever read? I often find myself struggling to remember how to explain the essays to you. And so we were talking about this, like we said, off camera. And this just reminded me of one of mine that I tend to use, just because it's not so much about what the essay content was, but her approach. So the student talked about her political beliefs, and she just comes out strong right away. And so initially you think, oh, like this is a very this is who I am. There's not going to be much beyond this. But her like third sentence was, but I am looking for a different environment to put myself in because I want to challenge these political beliefs and make them stronger. And then the rest of the essay was about being open-minded and tolerable and understanding different perspectives. And that was powerful. I mean, that's an essay that goes beyond just kind of describing who you are and what you actually want to do with who you are. And so in the same way that Liz's grandparent essay, I mean, often you might hear, don't write about politics, don't write about certain topics, but there's always a way to do these topics and make them interesting and compelling for us as readers.
Yeah. I'm going to tease you about saying tolerable instead of tolerant, because it's
You're right.
It's a funny one. Let's all try to be tolerable, but also tolerant.
Right. See, she's always that professor
that teacher in me. Yeah. We were going to talk a little bit about, we could talk for a very long time, obviously, about the actual kind of main essay that's going to travel through all of your applications to different schools within your Common App or Coalition application, or even a school's individual application. But we also thought we'd address some of the shorter answers that you might see on your applications, which range from like short takes. We know like the QuestBridge application, for example, has all these great little short answer questions. A lot of your applications will have supplemental questions that encourage you to reflect on why exactly you're applying to a particular school. Some of those, like why this school questions, will be framed around what you want to study, and some of them will be framed more broadly about just what appeals to you about this particular institution or its communities. So we thought we'd talk a little bit about those. I'm kicking it to Jackie because I'm blanking on exactly where else I wanted to go with that. But we had some good talks about that on Friday.
Right. And so it's like, especially when I give advice, I tend to focus more on what your approach is in your main essay, but the same thing goes for these supplemental essays. And And we understand that you'll have so many you'll be answering. But in cases like QuestBridge or even our own supplement, the Why Northwestern, we can kind of glean a sense of you that's different than the rest of the application, especially those short answer QuestBridge. I think we talked about, we enjoy just kind of briefly going through them and seeing sparks of your personality, because these are a little bit more laid back. They're not so much about being tailored specifically for 7 different schools, but also, you know, showing yourself. It's just you answering, what's your favorite book? How's your perfect day?
And they're like disarming a little, because you've gotten yourself so hung up on the essay that now all of a sudden you get to answer these shorter questions, and we love seeing yourselves in those answers, and you can feel free to kind of treat the main essay as equally disarming. I think you would do yourself a favor.
True, yeah.
For those of you who don't know what QuestBridge is, we've mentioned it a few times now. It's a program that kind of for students who identify as low income to apply to a number of colleges that are QuestBridge members through a QuestBridge specific application. So we're a QuestBridge member school, and so that's one of the applications that we accept, along with the coalition application and the common application. So if we talk about QuestBridge, that's what we mean. I think that's what you said goes great for those short answer questions. We don't have the short answer questions on our main Northwestern application, the common application, but a number of schools that you all may be considering do. And again, have fun with those.
Yes.
But I do say my one piece of kind of rote advice is, like, if you're funny, be funny. If you're not funny, now is not the time to try to like practice your comic routine. You know, just be yourself, right? What about that Why Northwestern statement? Or let's talk about our specific application in this case. Just give some folks who may be thinking about applying to Northwestern some advice. So Jackie is the double alum, so I'll let her.
So our supplemental essay we like to call shorthand Why Northwestern, because at the heart of the question is, why are you applying to Northwestern? But the question itself kind of makes you consider what resources, opportunities, things about our community are you drawn to, and then also on the other end, how could you potentially contribute to those spaces? And so when you're answering that question, my key advice is always be specific. But I don't mean just like go look up our course catalog and like copy every class you're interested in an essay and that's it. I mean, think about like what you are drawn to specifically. Is it maybe one of those classes, but that professor, right? Or is it a student group on campus that you can see yourself getting involved with? That's where I lean with my advice in that. And what I hope to see in that essay is someone who has really thought through what this community is here at Northwestern across all those spaces, academically, culturally, within students, within staff and faculty, and how that might fit into their college experience. That's what I'm looking for. Not just a list of like, I love that you have a lake, and I love that you have purple as your color, and I look good in purple. Like, those are fine, like intro statements, but there are ways to go beyond that, right?
Right. And again, this is another opportunity for you to help us imagine with you who you might become in college, right? Maybe even more so than that main essay. This is really nudging you to do some kind of envisioning, and so we can envision along with you. I do
want to say that when you mentioned earlier, like everyone kind of hyper focuses on the essay. These spaces are here for a reason, and the schools that you're looking at, ours included, are evaluating those essays to get a sense of who you are within what Northwestern is, or within whatever college you're looking at is. And so I want to highlight that while we encourage you to be yourself in these essays and have fun, also do your research with them too. Like I would say, like take the time to also think about these essays, and maybe take away some of that time from the essay to think about these supplemental essays.
Right. And don't get hung up on them as a space where you need to rehearse your resume, because that's not, we want to see you connecting thoughts about why you love what you do with what you might do in college, but that doesn't mean you need to sort of, again, rehearse your resume or your accomplishments again. And the other thing is I don't think anyone's expecting you to prove that you've become an expert on a particular college, right? Rather, it's more about taking time to respond with substance and specificity about kind of, again, how you why this place appeals to you, or how you envision yourself growing and thriving in a particular place, or making use of the extraordinary number of resources that any college you're probably looking at have, far more than you could ever use in your 4 years there, right? So starting to give some critical thought to that, and then put it on paper. I had one other thing, but I forgot.
All good.
But I heartily endorse what Jackie said about that why X school statement.
Right.
We were going to kind of wrap up. Is there anything else we were going to talk about that we're missing?
I wonder if it's just useful to understand that when we talk about, when we're reviewing applications, you hear things like committee or team readers, like what does that look like? And I think in our process, at least, that you need to understand that this essay is read within the context of the entire application, both essays, that the main essay and our supplemental essay. And so we are understanding you as a person, like I said before, quantitatively, and then when we see those qualitative pieces, we're reviewing it at the same time. So alongside those transcripts and your activities list and your recommendation letters, we are reading the essays to form it all together. And so I want that to be clear. And I mean, I think we talked about, and we maybe wanted to share about how in committee, sometimes we will focus on the essay, and sometimes it's a piece that it was important, but this isn't the focus in the committee right now.
Right. So your applications may be read individually by admission directors, and also discussions occur during committee sessions where folks are making decisions. And we do read your essays. I think that's the first thing we want to make clear. And I think the other, maybe less often discussed reality is that for some of you, your essay is going to be a huge part of your application, and it's going to really help highlight or resonate out the qualities that you bring to or that you might bring to a particular college community, right? For some of you, your essay is going to be a kind of requisite part of your application, and the strengths that you bring are going to shine through in other parts of your application, whether it's your recommendations or the work that you've done in high school or the ways that you contribute to a family setting, right? There's so much that we can learn from different aspects of your application. Even the points that seem like data points bring narrative to the surface. So your essay helps contextualize all of those data points and kind of infuse narrative into them, right? But we're also going to read your essays in the context of the rest of your application.
Right.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that thread. So and then I think finally we were talking on Friday in preparation for this about just again, thinking through the common advice that we hear about proofreading, and don't have this over-edited by a guardian or parent or teacher, because again, it's going to sound like them and it won't sound like you. All of that's fine. It's great to have other people read it. Have people who know you well read it and ask them, does it sound like me, right? There's no shame, I think, in handing this off to a friend or a parent or a teacher or an aunt or uncle or whomever, and asking what they think, right? But what did we say on Friday? Don't polish out the substance.
Right, exactly. It was kind of like this idea of don't polish it out, right? And so I totally agree on that end, and just an understanding that since we mentioned before, we are actually reading these essays. We are actually looking at them in the sense of what your voice is. Yeah. That's what we're looking for.
They can be conversational, right?
Right.
So an essay can be well written, but also conversational. It need not be so formal or polished that the substance falls out or the voice falls out. So as you kind of lean into your summers, right now we're leaning into summer, although you may watch this video at another time of year. I hope it's evergreen. But two things not to get overly hung up on: the topic,
right,
and extreme polish,
yes.
Right? I think those are our don'ts, but if you can call them that. I think they're invitations to let go of some of the common anxieties and spend your time reflecting and thinking about more substantive things that are really going to help this be a more enjoyable process for you in terms of writing it. And then the sort of strategic secret there is your essay is going to be better for it, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Anything else we wanted to share?
I think I just also want to hone in on this idea that we've given advice in a sense throughout all this, and hopefully we did keep it vague, because I think at the end of the day, we want you to understand there's no right one way to do this. There's no formula. Unfortunately, there is no formula. And so we're not looking for a certain outline of an essay. We're not looking for one approach. We just hope you kind of take in everything we've gone over to understand we're looking to get a sense of who you are. And that's however you want to answer that essay, however you want to do that, that's what we want to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all for joining us. We're going to go enjoy this beautiful day.
Yes, thank you.
Be safe and healthy.